In the hot summer of 1814, the United States found itself involved in the War of 1812, a fierce conflict between the young nation and the British Empire. Tensions had risen for several reasons, including the impressment of American sailors by the British Navy and British interference with U.S. trade. Now, at the time, the British Empire was fighting in the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, and they desperately needed sailors for their navy. With a shortage of men for their naval forces, Britain began forcibly seizing American sailors from their own merchant ships and recruiting them into service for the British Navy. Now, for Americans who had only recently fought and won their freedom from Britain in the Revolutionary War, this action was a hard blow to their freedom. It seemed to many Americans at the time like a betrayal of the hard-won liberty of the young nation. So what exactly did this young nation do? Well, it thrust itself into yet another war with its former colonizer. Britain was just going to have to learn the hard way, it seemed. By August 1814, the young republic's dreams of defeating Britain were growing dimmer. It did not look good for the Americans. The British forces were able to capture American outposts and weaken the young nation's defenses. The British then decided to make a strategic attack on Washington, D.C. and destroy the new nation's capital city. On the fateful day of August 24th, 1814, British troops marched upon Washington, D.C., and in a display of overwhelming force, they set fire to the U.S. Capitol building, the White House, and even the U.S. Treasury, reducing these structures to nothing more than rubble and ash. The destruction of the Capitol building also came with the destruction of the Library of Congress, which was housed inside of the Capitol building. This loss for the nation was far more than the destruction of physical books. It was a blow to the intellectual foundation of the United States. You see, the Library of Congress had played a vital role in supporting lawmakers and providing them resources to inform their decisions made for the country. Its destruction meant not just the loss of a building, but the loss of knowledge, of the very tools needed by the people of the government. The American government, already stretched thin, now had to reckon with the question, how would they rebuild what had been lost? As the nation reeled from the devastation caused by the British, a Pluto and Scorpio man decided that he could not stand by idly. What Pluto and Scorpio could? After all, Pluto and Scorpio natives are often acquainted with losing things close to them and having to rebuild. This particular Pluto and Scorpio man was a retired man living in Virginia, and he had spent a lifetime collecting books, and his personal library had grown to become one of the most significant collections in the country at that time. He was a man with a deep intellectual curiosity in a variety of topics, just as you would expect a Pluto and Scorpio to be. He was a man who had a passion for knowledge and had a desire to see the nation succeed. When news of the fire and destruction of the Library of Congress reached this Pluto and Scorpio man, he felt an overwhelming sense of loss, something other Pluto and Scorpios can understand. For him, the library's destruction was a tragedy that struck at the heart of the American people. The books represented a future of possibility and growth. Their loss was a wound that needed healing, and Pluto and Scorpios know all about healing. He understood at that time that knowledge was the key to democracy, and without it, the republic would falter. This man, now in his early 70s, had lived through his own personal and financial hardships, including selling off some of his prized land to pay his debts. Yet, despite his own financial constraints, he had one invaluable asset: his library, a collection of over 6,000 books. In his letter to Congress, the Pluto in Scorpio wrote, "I have a large collection of books that I have acquired over a lifetime, many of which have been used to me in my own intellectual pursuits. I offer them to the government with the hope that they will serve to rebuild the Library of Congress, which has been so tragically destroyed. I do so with the understanding that these books will provide future generations of Americans with the knowledge they need to thrive as citizens and leaders." In his correspondence with Congress, the Pluto and Scorpio man expressed his willingness to accept any terms for the sale, even agreeing to defer payment until after the war was over. His offer was born out of a sense of duty to the nation, not a desire for financial gain. The price of the collection was set at $23,950, which turned out to be a little over $3.50 a book, an amount that would not only provide the necessary funds to replenish the library, but would also help the Pluto and Scorpio man settle some of his own financial obligations. Congress accepted the man's offer, and in early 1815, his collection of 6,487 books became the foundation for the new Library of Congress. The collection spanned a wide range of subjects, including philosophy, science, law, and literature. The Pluto and Scorpio's man's vision for the library was one that reflected his belief in the power of the informed. It was a library that could serve as a resource for all Americans, not just the intellectual elite. The library was rebuilt from the ashes of its predecessor, just like a Scorpio can be a phoenix rising from the ashes of what once was. Through his generosity, this man helped shape the United States, ensuring that future generations would have access to the resources they needed to become informed, thoughtful, and engaged citizens. His donation was an act of rebirth for the Library of Congress. The Pluto and Scorpio man had once again proven that even in the face of destruction, renewal was possible. So just who was this Pluto and Scorpio man that helped the nation rebuild its library after the terrible attack by the British? Well, it was none other than the third president of the United States. That's right, Thomas Jefferson, the primary author of the Declaration of Independence and the founder of University of Virginia. And now you know what is up, my buttercups.